right now. But next summer, God willing, she's doing an internship at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy.
I literally was standing outside the building the other day, and my wife and I went to Midland, and we went to the park in the back where the
Yep,
bridge is.
yep. I was there the last
And we were
time.
just walking around. We didn't know anything about Midland, and I walked up, and there was the Mackinac Center.
Yeah.
And we ate a little restaurant about 3 doors down from there.
I love the place right across the street. It's a great French-influenced little bistro place.
So not this summer,
Anyway.
but next summer, an internship.
Yeah, because this summer, she job shadowed there, and she just loved it. And so she said she wants to, God willing, if the Lord's in it.
It sounds mighty good.
Yes.
It has a great reputation.
Yeah, and she loves the research,
Good.
speech and debate kind of.
They do a ton of it, as you well know.
Oh yeah. So and then
Good.
maybe Hillsdale the following.
That sounds right.
I know.
The Hillsdale connection.
I know. So
You've already toured Hillsdale and everything?
we've been there a number of times.
Speech and debate club.
I adore
We
it.
love it.
There's
I
a
know.
number of alumni that work there.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, so.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see. The Lord will lead.
Lots of SSI kids have gone to
I
Hillsdale.
believe that. I do.
Oh, yeah.
They have a great reputation.
It's a beautiful campus. It's got a great atmosphere.
Yes.
Molly and I got to know a bunch of them about 2 years back. We went to a graduation and saw 5 of them graduate. It was just one of those weird things. We knew everybody all from the same class.
Yeah.
One's in the Army now. One of them went to work for Hillsdale.
Love it. Oh, Ben Strickland.
No,
I don't know
Nathan
Ben.
Lehman.
Ethan. Well, there's 2 Lehman. There is a Nathan Lehman, and I know an Ethan Lehman, and they're not related. They're not related.
That's our Nathan Lehman.
Yep. Good to see you.
We want you guys, maybe don't sit in the very front row, we want you to have a good view. But come down to this front center section, students specifically, please. Thank you very much. The chatter will continue for approximately 3 more minutes. Welcome.
It's up for a different generation. Just a little bit. It's just not all bad. It's
Let's see.
The seat taken?
Absolutely not. It's over yours. Come on in.
Yeah, this is smart. Like,
Legroom. Lots of legroom.
I'm gonna see if I can get closer. If that does anything.
Her brother graduated from fire technique. She had a day.
Well, hey,
Said what you need.
it's me. Live stream coming through.
no, but we can hear them, and that's what's important. Not I told her I said all of Senate and House are here.
Do we have anybody running mics up there? Or do we not need?
think this is the best position anyway. Gets the most perspective.
Yeah, I made one.
This is the best seat in the house.
Indeed. So I can see everyone.
But again, I need to remain silent.
Unless you want to commentate about the track.
Is that appreciated?
Depends on the viewer.
I'll keep silent.
Alright.
A wonderful good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our mock trial presentation. For our guests, thank you for joining us, especially I'm Joseph Cecil, the president at SSI. It's a joy to have you with us as we showcase not a performance tonight, but the hard, diligent, and very, very real work that these 8 students have done this week, okay? We'll ask that we give them our full attention. Guys and gals, let's make sure that we're quiet and respectful, again, of the incredible work that this team has done this week. Everything you're about to see, again, is not a performance, it's not rehearsed, it is prepared and hard work about to come to fruition. So good luck to both of the teams, and do us proud. With that, we will begin.
Second-degree murder, alternatively negligent homicide, and alternatively manslaughter. Prosecution, are you ready to begin? Are you ready to proceed, defense? Bailiff, would you call the jury in, please? Prosecution, I understand prior to this, the hearing tonight, that there has been some stipulations as far as the evidence is concerned on some of the exhibits. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Okay, we'll go through those at the end. And also, there's been some stipulations as it relates to the qualifications of our 2 experts. Is that correct? Yes, defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
So we'll begin. Are you prepared with an opening statement, Mr. Prosecutor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Report.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I thank you for your time. Today, the prosecution will present to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, irrefutable evidence of just how reckless one man's actions can be, and how weighty are the consequences of the decisions that we conclude. Frank Howe has been brutally murdered. His family has lost a loved one, and his child has lost a father. We will prove that Mr. Smith knowingly entered a situation prepared to escalate and eager to assault. Hence, the evidence will show that the world has been robbed of Frank Howe, and a justice that we as an American people have a civic duty to avenge. On August 20th, 2002, Frank Howe rushed into Super King Market, desperate for the basic necessities, unprepared for the rapidly approaching final moments of his life. In an effort to not inconvenience his friend, Chris Dunn, who was waiting in the car, Frank hurried out of the grocery store. His rush, his quick walk, caught the eye of the nearby security guard, Pat Smith, who then, without warning or requesting to view a receipt, chased Frank and assaulted him with not one, but two deadly karate blows, one of which was a K5, one of the most impactful karate blows on a scale of K1 to K6. Frank was dead within minutes. The defendant witnessed Mr. Howe as he was suffering a heart attack induced by Mr. Smith's vital blow. By the time law enforcement appeared on the scene, Frank Howe had tragically passed, leaving behind his beloved baby and his baby's mother, while Mr. Howe was seen proudly standing over the corpse. In two strikes initiated by the defendant, the world has lost a soul that can never be replaced, a unique individual that is invaluable to this society and to humanity as a whole. It is our intention to prove today that Mr. Smith is guilty of second-degree murder through the knowledge that his irresponsible conduct would eventually cause the death of Frank Howe, manslaughter as he recklessly delivered a K5 directly to the torso with enough experience in karate that he knew the damage it could invoke. And finally, we intend to prove that Mr. Smith is guilty of negligent homicide, witnessing Mr. Howe's heart attack and progression to death induced by Mr. Smith's K5, and doing absolutely nothing to aid him, authorizing his soon-to-be expiration. The defendant has belligerently violated all three of these laws, twisting and integrating his black belt experience for his own demented means. Tell me, are a few basic necessities, basic items likely under $50 worth the murder of a human entity? Will the appraisal of Frank Howe's life conclude that it is proportionate to a $50 bill? I don't believe so. That is why I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, as representatives of our justice system, to evaluate this case with open minds. I implore you to protect the rights of the deceased and to enforce the verdict as guilty. We must not allow a cold-blooded murderer to run rampant. We must not allow this man to endanger anyone else. We must not allow him to repeat that which he is solely responsible for, the murder of Frank Howe. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the defense have a opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and please report. The prosecution has already told you that this case is about whether or not Pat Smith murdered Frank Howe. That is not the true story. What this case is truly about can be summarized into three parts. As a security guard, Pat Smith was pursuing what recently looked like to be a shoplifter, Frank Howe. And in doing so, he was protecting the public and himself. Secondly, as you will hear today, the Estrada family, who ran the police department, had a personal vendetta against Pat Smith due to past romantic relationships between Pat's father and Victoria Estrada's mother, the captain's ex-wife. Finally, what you will hear today is how the physical health of Frank Howe was not able to sustain such an act as sprinting out of Super King, which was approximately over 30 yards of intense cardio. And in Mr. Howe's terrible physical condition, this caused his heart to be pushed beyond its limits, resulting in cardiac arrest and death. That could have been avoided if he simply had sprinted. This evidence today will show that on August 20th, 2002, Pat Smith was doing his job in serving and protecting the public, going in and out of Super King. The evidence will further show that Pat Smith never acted with extreme indifference towards Frank Howell. Smith acted as appeared reasonable under the circumstances to protect himself and others. The evidence will show also that he didn't murder Frank, nor did he know that any of his actions would be a factor in his death. In fact, the evidence will show that the real cause of Frank Howell's death was his own poor coronary health, due to years of even decades of poor nutrition, poor physical habits, and drugs. As you hear from Dr. Shea in his testimony, due to how severe clogging of his arteries, his irrational sprint out of Super King caused a heart attack in the parking lot, which led directly to his death. We know that Pat Smith's blows did not cause Frank's death. Therefore, the prosecution will not be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that anything Pat did caused his death. As a result, based on the evidence provided, Pat Smith should be acquitted of all charges. In order to prevail in this case today, the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Pat Smith either intentionally, knowingly, and or recklessly caused the death of Frank Howell. Or they must show that Pat acted with such recklessness or negligence that he should be held liable. Today, the evidence will show that the prosecution will fail to meet that verdict. You'll be hearing from two witnesses today. The first witness will be Pat Smith, who will explain what truly happened August 20th, 2002. You will hear from him today that when a valid suspicion of shoplifting activity arose and he was pursuing Mr. Howell, he had heard Frank Howell yell behind him, "Leave me alone, or I'll stuff you full of blood." The second witness will be Dr. Shea. You will hear that the autopsy done by Dr. Williams was inaccurate and unreliable. You will hear that Dr. Williams failed to find drugs in Frank's body, nor did he find a 95% to 100% blocked arteries. These vital elements show Pat Smith is not responsible for Frank Howell's death. According to Dr. Williams' testimony today, she will not only confirm that Victoria Estrada was biased, but also had a vendetta against Pat Smith because of past relationship and intended to put Smith away for years. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you. Your Honor.
Thank you. Prosecution prepared to call its first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution would like to call witness Chris Dunn to the stand.
Chris Dunn, please come forward. Before you sit down, you have to raise your right hand. All of you testify here tonight. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name for the record.
Chris Dunn.
All right, Ms. Dunn. First of all, how did you know the victim, Frank Howell?
We grew up as kids together. We went to the same high school and hung out ever since.
Are you familiar with the incident on August 20th?
I am. I saw all of it.
Did you see the victim, Frank, before the incident?
I did. We were going to a job fair earlier that day, so we met up at McDonald's for lunch.
What happened after lunch?
He told me he needed to smoke, and then we needed to go to Super King, change our clothes for the job fair, so I drove him over there and he got out to do what he needed.
What happened at Super King?
Well, I told him to hurry because we needed to get to the job fair. So he went inside, but it was taking a while. So I got up to go check on him and tell him to get back in the car. And when I walked into the store, I saw him running towards me, which I thought was good. But then I saw Pat Smith running behind him.
Did you hear anything?
I heard Frank turn to Pat and say, "Leave me alone and let me give you the stuff back."
Did you recognize the person pursuing you?
I did. We used to be co-workers.
What did the defendant do after Frank yelled at him?
Ignored him, kept running, and he did what he called a K6 to Frank's chest.
How did you know it was a K6?
He showed it a lot in the store all the time for fun because he was pretty proud of his karate skills.
As far as you know, is a K6 dangerous?
All I know is that Pat told me he broke a horse's leg once with it.
What happened after the first blow?
I saw Frank gasp, like he couldn't breathe. He fell to the ground, and I saw his hand reach into his pocket, but it never came out because he stopped moving. And then Pat jumped on him again and did the same karate chop to him.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with a copy of Exhibit 4?
Could you identify what that is?
It is a map of the Super King parking lot, Your Honor.
Does the record reflect that I am showing a clean, unmarked copy of Exhibit 4 to the opposing counsel?
Can you identify what that map is, or what the exhibit is?
Yes, and spot A is where I parked the car, and I was at spot B when I saw Pat attack Frank.
And about how far from where you were standing was the defendant when he struck Frank?
About 100 meters away.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
I will be asking you questions which can be answered answered. So you have previously worked at Circle K, correct? Yes. Earlier this year you were fired from your job. That's correct. Isn't it true you were fired from an accusation of stealing the store's merchandise? An accusation, yes. It was Pat Smith who accused you of stealing, correct? Yes. Isn't it true that you and Mr. Howell have had a close relationship since you were both in high school? Mm-hmm. And you said that you were 100 meters away from Frank Howell when the incident had happened? Yes. 100 meters is longer than a football field, correct?
I guess.
And you stated that you saw Mr. Frank's face gasp for air as he was struck.
I know my friend, it was pretty dramatic.
You were claiming today that you saw someone's specific facial expression from over a football field away.
Yes.
Is it not true that you have colored your testimony to Frank's bias due to your lifelong relationship with him and mutual dislike for Pat Smith?
No.
You are aware that Frank is a drug user of multiple substances?
I know he smokes. I don't know what he smokes.
And he has been using these substances for a long time.
Ever since I've known him.
It's true that Frank knew his doctor had instructed him to stop smoking?
Yes, I tried to help him.
So just before Frank went into Super King, Frank smoked a cigarette?
Yes.
This was not long before he sprinted out of Super King?
Yes.
Isn't it accurate that Frank knew putting such exertion on his body with his current health condition was bad for him?
Yes.
And you claim that you saw Pat do a K6?
Yes.
However, you admitted that you never studied martial arts.
Correct.
And again, you said that you were standing over 100 meters away, or over an entire football field away from the incident that happened, and you would claim to recognize a K6?
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Prosecution, we have another witness.
I would like to call Vic Estrada.
Vic Estrada, thank you for your testimony. Have a seat and vote from previous this morning.
For the record, please state your name.
Victoria Estrada.
Victoria Estrada, where do you work?
I work as a sheriff's deputy and a detective at the department.
Why were you initially called to the scene of Frank Cow's death?
Well, initially, uniforms were dispatched to the scene because of a shoplifter, and then I got the call for backup.
What was your first sight of the crime scene?
My first sight of the crime scene was Pat standing over Frank's dead body.
When you arrived at the scene, how would you describe Pat's posture?
Pat was proudly standing over Frank.
Thank you, Victoria. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any cross-exam?
No, Your Honor.
No cross-examination. Thank you for your testimony. Any further witnesses on behalf of the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor. Prosecution would like to call to the stand Dr. Willie Williams.
Pardon me?
Prosecution would like to call to the stand Dr. Willie Williams.
Willie Williams, please come forward and have a seat until you're sworn.
Thank you for coming today, Dr. Williams.
My pleasure.
Please state your name for the records.
Yeah, it's Dr. Willie Williams. Willie, like Wonka. Williams, like Bill.
Dr. Williams, what is your certified profession?
Call me a chief forensic pathologist, MD.
Where did you graduate university?
Yeah, I attained a Bachelor of Science degree, the medical biology of University of Stanford University. Also University of Arizona right now, went to the School of Medicine.
How long have you been actively involved in the medical examination field?
Since 1983 until now, so, I don't know what I'm doing, just a little bit.
From your thorough examination of the body, how is Frank Howe underdeveloped in comparison to the average male?
I mean, he was out of shape for starters. There was signs of drug abuse, he smoked, and the list goes on.
What sort of trauma did you notice that Mr. Howe's corpse suffered?
Yeah, so his heart was severely bruised. The aorta, vena cava, and pulmonary arteries had some, but not significant arteriosclerosis. In other words, there was a lot of fat buildup around the arteries. Damage to the heart is what is known as a cardiac contusion, which is a serious complexion of deceleration injury. In short, deceleration force affects the chest wall, causing a direct pressure on the myocardium. Or in other words, he got hit really, really hard.
Could you explain the term soft tissue hemorrhage?
Yeah, so essentially soft tissue hemorrhage is an escape of blood from a ruptured blood vessel, especially when perfused. Does that make sense? Or should I use crayons for Dr. Shea's testimony?
May I approach Dr. Williams with a copy of Exhibit 10, the Pima County Medical Examiner's Office Autopsy Report? Let the record show I am presenting the original report to the defense. Dr. Williams, can you please read to me the highlighted section?
Yes. Injuries, external and internal. There are major blunt trauma injuries to center front torso. There's roughly a 3 by 4 inch contusion over the upper front chest, and underlying the interior chest. Sorry, you can take it. You can't make a dyslexic still a doctor. Sorry. Walls contain soft tissue, hemorrhage with fractures. The 5th and 6th rib. Cardiovascular system reveals several internal heart damage. There is some evidence of narrowing and hardening on the arteries.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. What, in your professional opinion, would cause a soft tissue hemorrhage?
Yes, soft tissue hemorrhage, that can occur in the presence of bleeding. Usually, sometimes different kinds of surgeries can do it as well, mostly trauma though.
Could you explain if such a hemorrhage could cause one to bleed to death or induce a heart attack?
Yeah, so a heart attack occurs when the artery that sends blood and oxygen to the heart is blocked. Fatty cholesterol contains deposits built up over time, forming plaques in the heart and the arteries. If a plaque ruptures, a blood clot can form. The clot can block arteries and cause a heart attack. Keyword there being rupture.
May I approach the witness with a copy of Exhibit 3, Section 16 of the Merck Manual?
You may, counsel, but please be prepared to wrap up shortly.
Let the record show I am presenting the original document to the defense. Dr. Williams, what does the Merck Manual suggest is the death rate of coronary artery disease among white men aged 25 to 34?
The death rate from a CAD among white men ages 25 to 34 is about 1 in 10,000.
Dr. Williams, in your professional expertise, what was the main cause of Mr. Howe's death?
My examination of the body, as well as the review of the police report prepared by the detective, Nick Estrada, leads me to conclude that Mr. Howe died from a heart attack caused at least in part by a severe blow to the chest.
Who do you believe murdered Mr. Howe?
I'll be dependent. Maybe Pat.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. No further questions.
Yes, Jack. I will be asking you questions which can be answered in a simple yes or no. Is it true that one of your colleagues filed for a grievance against you for suggesting you had accepted money for performing a private autopsy?
Yes or no only?
Yes.
Yes.
And you had conducted the autopsy of Mr. Frank Howe?
I had conducted the autopsy.
So you read the medical report of Dr. Shea?
I did read the medical report of Dr. Shea. We have some slight disagreements.
I'm correct in stating you even agreed with Dr. Shea that the Merck Manual is authoritative, true?
The Merck Manual is authoritative. It is written in 1899. There are some things that are a little bit outdated on it, but yes.
Your Honor, objection to the question. The question can be answered in a simple yes or no. The witness is improperly narrating beyond that. I have limited time here. I ask that you instruct the witness to answer my question with a yes or no.
Could you just please answer the question?
Yes or no?
Dr. Shea found that Mr. Howe's coronary vessels to be 95 to 100% blocked.
Yes.
Isn't it true that you determined that a 95 to 100% blockage was insignificant?
Yes.
So it is accurate to deduce that a 100% blocked artery cannot pump blood, which causes death?
Yes.
Not only did you fail to examine the blockage, but you never tested or reported for ethanol, cocaine, opiates, nicotine, cannabis, or barbiturates, Mr. Howe?
Everything was done by the book.
But you still never tested for these
It was a
drugs.
standard procedure that we did by the book. Everything I did.
Can I ask that you answer me in a simple yes or no?
Yes.
And finally, isn't it true that you failed to photographically bruising or scanned x-rays of Mr. Howe?
Yes.
So wouldn't it be more than accurate to conclude that you conducted an inadequate autopsy?
I would say no.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, witness Eileen. Any further witnesses for the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Prosecution rests.
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense, do you have any witnesses that you wish to call?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to call Pat Smith to the stand.
Pat Smith, please have a seat and previously sworn.
Please state your name.
Patrick Smith.
And what is your occupation?
Yeah, I'm a security guard right now at the Super King. I've been a security guard for the past couple of years at high school.
And why were you hired at Super King?
Yeah, I was hired at Super King to help stop a epidemic. Obviously, I know that word is loaded in the COVID era, but epidemic of shoplifting that was happening there that the prior security guards hadn't been able to forestall.
And how common were shoplifters at Super King?
Sadly, at this point, they were, for my time, very common.
Now, where were you on August 20th?
Yeah, August 20th, I was at my job at Super King, kind of close to the doors, watching and keeping an eye on things, making sure that people were safe.
And where did you see Frank on August 20th?
Yeah, so Frank was darting out the door when I saw him first, right there leaving the Super King.
And what was your reaction to this?
So I was suspicious, first of all, because not many people, dart out the door as fast as he did. Tucson's not a huge city, but we have a lot of small town vibes. The thing that made us particularly suspicious was Mr. Howe at that time didn't have a bag for his cigarettes, cigarette lighters, and diapers. And one of the policies that we've instituted there at Super King was to mandate that everyone who has actually been rounded up and gone through the checkout process has to put their stuff in a bag and are given a receipt. And we use this, this is one of the techniques that I encourage the general manager there, Terry, to do in order to help us identify who actually paid for their goods and who was just shopping. So it was suspicious when I didn't see him have either a bag or receipts.
And what was your reaction to this?
Yeah, so obviously my job is to make sure that things aren't shoplifted, so I started chasing him. When I did that, Frank looked back at me and said, "Stop following me or I'll fill you full of lead." And I said, "If you do that, you're going to be sorry." And I continued to follow him.
And what did you think of that?
The adrenaline was just going, so I didn't think a lot, but I just knew that this man was dangerous. There was a lot of people at the time in the shopping center. At the end of August, people are getting ready to go back to school. There's a lot of kids, a lot of moms with their kids shopping for school supplies, a lot of old ladies. And so I thought, if he's willing to threaten me, what might he do to the other people behind me? So I wanted to follow him and make sure that, first of all, I did my job and get the goods back, but also didn't want to allow this to happen again. There's an old thought that says, what gets rewarded gets repeated. If you allow people to just shoplift with impunity, you can't run a society that way. At micro level,
catch up to him?
Yeah, more like he caught up to me, where he just stopped, turned around suddenly, reached for his pocket in a really frantic way, as if he was trying to draw something, like a gun. From his prior statements, it seemed reasonable to believe that he was trying to draw something to said, "I'll fill you full of lead." So, yeah, that's what happened.
And what did you do after you saw Frank reach for his pocket?
Yeah, I was scared right then. But in a moment of clarity, I realized that I had to stop him. First of all, for my own self-defense. I'm not, I didn't want to die. So I had to use some force, and I had to use what's called the K5 block, chop. you're not familiar with karate, there are 6 different levels of chops, from 1 being relatively insignificant to 6 being particularly severe. I had heard from my sensei, who's an expert, that K5 is good for life and death situations. Wasn't trying to kill him, but I knew I needed to use substantial force.
And what was your intention when you used karate on Frank?
Yeah, my intention was just to protect myself, protect the people behind me. Like I said, it was a busy day. If a shot was taken at that range to the building with no good backstop, there was a good chance that if by some miracle the bullet missed me, there's a good chance it would ricochet and hit one of the people inside. And I couldn't live with that, my conscience. The reason I'm security guard is because I want to protect people.
Objection, Your Honor. That is an expert opinion as far as Frank's bullet having a high likelihood of hitting a shopper.
I'll overrule that. I'll let him answer the question.
I was mostly against Your Honor.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor.
Isn't it true that you're in the best shape of anyone you know?
Yeah, that's a relatively small pool. Not, you know, as you can see, I'm a little bit overweight, but I'm in pretty good shape for Tucson, Arizona.
Isn't it true that you're an excellent all-around athlete?
I take pride in doing well in all sports, but yeah, I've been pretty good.
Isn't it true that your favorite sport is martial arts?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite sports. At the moment, the affidavit, I didn't think I said so, but I've taken up water polo. Water polo is, I think, my current sport.
Now, I would like you to answer in yes or no questions. Could you do that for me?
I'll do my best.
Isn't it true your favorite... Oh, wait. Isn't it true you became a very serious about karate in high school and took it from the best sensei in town?
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't it true that you won karate competitions nearly every time?
Yeah, that's right. You read my resume?
You received your black belt within 2 years, correct?
Thank you, yeah.
Isn't it true your karate chop was legendary around town?
I think you're lapping on too much praise. I said it'd be pretty good. I wouldn't know if it's legendary or not. I'd ask my people.
You can easily break wooden boards with your hands and feet, correct?
That's mostly a show trick, but yeah.
Isn't it true you struck Frank down?
You mean I hit him?
You struck Frank down.
Is that a question?
It's a yes or no question.
That was a statement. Yes, I did. Like I said in my testimony, I did use a K5 shot to his chest.
Isn't it true Frank fell down after the blow you administered to his chest?
Yeah, and he was still reaching for his pocket.
Isn't it true after you struck him, he did not get back up?
Yeah, like I said, he was still reaching for his pocket.
Isn't it true that Frank was fine until you struck him?
What do you mean by fine? Like mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
Isn't it true that Frank was unharmed until you struck him?
I can't answer that question honestly. I don't know.
Is it true that you murdered Frank Howell?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Karate chops are rated from K1 to K6, with K6 being as the most severe, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's what I said earlier.
Isn't it true you never used a karate chop more severe than a K3 until death of Frank happened?
Yeah, that's right.
You found Frank's deceased body. You found on Frank's deceased body his receipt in his pocket, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't it true that you stated, if you try, you'll be sorry, and you meant what you said?
Yeah, he threatened my life. I was prepared to defend mine.
Isn't it true, after you did the K2 move, you stated that this time it worked?
Yeah, I got his attention. That was the whole context. That was my intent of the K2.
There was a rumor about you breaking your horse's leg, correct?
And that's all it was, a rumor.
Isn't it true that the leg was at least bruised?
Yeah, that's right.
You received a K-5 to the year of January 2002 from a student, correct?
I think that was January 2021. I'm only 25, but I wasn't doing karate when I was 4 years old. I think the stenographer got something wrong. It's all good.
Isn't it true that you haven't heard well since then?
On the left side, yeah, I'm a little bit harder hearing on the left side. But on the right side, I'm fine.
You used the K-5 karate chop on Frank Cal's chest, correct?
That's right.
Your sensei told you that the K-5 move should only be used in very serious situations, correct?
Yeah, and I was being threatened by my life, so I'd say disqualified.
You jumped on Frank and gave a K2 after the K-5 karate chop, correct?
Yeah, because he was still reaching for his pocket, like as if he had a gun.
No further questions.
Can you read the record?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any further witnesses on behalf of the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to call Taylor Shea to the stand.
The name again?
Taylor Shea,
Taylor Shea. You've been previously sworn. Please have a seat.
Please state your name.
My name is Dr. Taylor Shea.
And what is your occupation?
I'm the chairman of the Forensic Pathology Department at the University of Texas in Austin.
And can you please describe your education?
I went to New York University in Brooklyn and have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and a Bachelor of Arts in Physical Education. I went on at New York University, received a graduate degree in chemistry and then a PhD in biochemistry. I received my MD from Johns Hopkins University and did my internship at Bethesda Naval Hospital in anatomic forensics.
Your Honor, at this time, I ask the court to recognize the witness as an expert in cardiac pathology based on his education and experience, pursuant to Rule 702.
Any objection? Prosecution, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
He is certified and qualified as an expert in cardiac pathology.
Who did the autopsy on Frank Cal?
Dr. Williams.
And what are some observations you made reviewing Dr. Williams' report?
Unfortunately, Dr. Williams' autopsy was substandard, and therefore his conclusions are inaccurate.
And what were your observations on his heart?
On his heart, well, and this gets to something Dr. Williams failed to note in his autopsy. The heart had a block, coronary vessels had a blockage between 95 and 100%. The technical term for this is arteriosclerosis.
And is this level of blockage severe?
It is so severe that it means a heart attack is imminent.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with a copy of Exhibit 11?
You may.
Let the record show that I am showing a clean and unmarked copy of the exhibit to the witness.
Thank you.
Do you recognize this exhibit?
This is my forensic review of the medical examiner's autopsy of Frank Cal.
And can you describe the blood sample results?
Most noticeably, according to this, and this was absent in Dr. Williams' report, there is a high quantity of cannabis.
With the previous question in mind, how does this affect Frank's heart?
Well, given his physical condition and the high use of drugs, it means that it just adds to what has already been stated, that he was a walking heart attack.
And based on the evidence provided, what do you believe caused Frank's heart failure?
Myocardial contusion is present in just 14% of cases involving immediate fatality, or 14% of immediate fatalities involving blunt trauma. Therefore, it's highly unlikely that the blunt trauma caused his heart attack, and highly likely that the running itself is what brought him to have the heart failure.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Anyone else here?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Shea, I will be asking a series of questions, very specific questions that will solicit responses that can only be answered in a simple yes or no. Can you follow this limitation?
I'll try.
Thank you. Isn't it true that you have a bachelor's degree of science in chemistry and a bachelor of arts degree in physical education?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you have an undergraduate degree with nothing pertaining to the heart function or failure?
No.
Isn't it true that you have testified several dozen times for the defense in homicide trials?
Yes.
You have only testified twice for the state and or prosecution at homicide trials. Is that correct?
Yes.
There is a complaint against you with the Texas Medical Examiner's Office, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it true that that complaint was that your testimony was false and biased in favor of the defense in 3 separate cases?
Your Honor, because of my character and my reputation, I think it's appropriate that I elaborate a little bit rather than just say yes or no with your permission. The answer qualified is yes, and the qualification is no allegations have ever been proven, and I categorically deny that I have ever testified falsely.
Okay. Is it true that your fees are $275 per hour for out-of-court work?
Yes.
Thank you. Isn't it true that your fees for in-court testimony is $350 per hour?
Yes.
You have been paid $5,500 to this date for your work on this particular case, correct?
Correct.
There has been a previous motion to indict you for perjury from the Texas State Prosecutors Association, true?
Your Honor, may I elaborate on my answer? That is true, but once again, it has not been proven, and I categorically deny the allegations.
Okay. The defense counsel, would you agree that they are not coroners or pathologists?
They're lawyers, in other words?
Yes.
Yes.
The defense counsel was convinced that the death of the victim was not caused by the blow to the chest. Is that true, according to your affidavit?
I think the evidence presents that conclusion.
Okay. You were contacted by the legal defense team for Pat Smith in December 2020. Is that correct?
Correct.
Isn't it true that the defense counsel wanted you to confirm that the deceased's heart attack was not caused by a blow to the chest?
Of course, since it wasn't.
Would that prove bias?
I do not think so.
All right. No further questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Can you hear direct?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may excuse. Any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Who would that be?
I'm sorry, no, Your Honor.
Defense press, is that the prosecution prepared for a closing statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Feel free.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we, the prosecution, have presented evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt just how reckless one man's actions can be, and how weighty the consequences are of the decisions that we conclude. Frank Howe has been brutally murdered, and we have proved Mr. Smith knowingly caused his death. And as a result, a child has lost a father. Before we proceed, let us define the charge. Second-degree murder is defined as the defendant having caused the death of the victim in at least one of the following: intending to cause death, knowing his action could cause death, or showing extreme recklessness / indifference to human life. Number 1, cause of death. Willie Williams previously stated that Frank was killed as a result of a blow to the chest. You also heard the defendant admit that he was the one who delivered the multiple, highly dangerous blows. 2, knowing his actions could kill. The defendant knew exactly the amount of damage his blows would cause as a result of his extensive experience in karate, yet he bludgeoned Frank's helpless body anyways. 3, intending to kill. Once again, surely with all of the defendant's experience in karate, Pat Smith surely knew that he was going to kill Frank Howe. Additionally, you heard Chris Dunn testify that the defendant struck Frank Howe over 100 meters away. It took him 100 meters to catch up with the victim, therefore giving him plenty of time to consider his actions. 4, extreme recklessness / indifference to human life. Pat Smith showed extreme indifference to human life when he acted upon an impulse with intention to kill. And even by his own admission, jumped on Frank Howe after already having hit him in the chest with his second most powerful karate chop, and continued to bludgeon him. Thus, having met all 4 requirements, when only 2 were needed, the evidence clearly shows that Pat Smith is guilty of second-degree murder. But even if you find that the defendant had sufficient provocation, he is still guilty of manslaughter. And even if you find that that is not the case, he is at least guilty of negligent homicide for not recognizing the unjustifiable risk of his actions. Pat Smith recklessly acted upon an impulse to kill today. There is now a man without a friend, a baby without a father, a world without Frank Howe. As my co-counsel asked in the opening statement, can under $50 of merchandise actually appraise the value of a human life? Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence leads to only one conclusion. Pat Smith is guilty. Therefore, we respectfully request that you find Pat Smith guilty of the murder of Frank Howe and fulfill the call for his justice. Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may it please the court. The issue before the court today is whether or not the defendant is guilty of the unlawful murder of Frank Howe. The state has charged our client, Pat Smith, with second-degree murder, manslaughter, and negligent homicide. It is the state's duty to prove every element of those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. If you find that they have failed to prove any elements of these charges, you must acquit Pat Smith of that charge. You've heard the evidence today.
The state has failed to prove that Pat Smith's physical actions against Frank Howe caused death, and the prosecution failed to prove that Pat Smith's actions were knowing, reckless, or extremely indifferent. In fact, under the circumstances and the stressful situation, Pat Smith, thinking that Frank Howe was reaching for a weapon, acted accordingly to protect others in the store. You heard Dr. Shea testify that the primary cause of death for Frank Howe was severe atherosclerosis, a 95 to 100% blocking of Howe's coronary arteries caused by years, perhaps even decades, of very poor eating habits as well as heavy smoking and drug use. Frank Howe's heart was so fragile that the mere sprint out of the store caused his death. Pat's actions ultimately did not cause Frank's demise. You also heard Dr. Shea describe that Dr. Williams' autopsy failed to prove that the heart attack was caused by a bullet to the chest. Dr. Williams didn't even provide any X-ray imaging of Mr. Howe, nor did he take photograph evidence of the body to prove his conclusions. Dr. Williams has not only deprived this jury of an opportunity to examine potential evidence of broken bones in Mr. Howe's chest, but has also deprived us of the evidence we need in order to determine the cause of death. This should be concerning to every party involved and leads us to believe Dr. Williams' conclusion on the matter to be untrustworthy and should not be considered for autopsical inquiries in this case. Again, that lack of evidence is reason to doubt the state's claim that Pat Smith caused Frank Howe's death. Where there is reason to doubt, we must acquit Pat Smith. As we recall in Dr. Williams' statement before the court today, he not only confirmed that there is bias on Victoria Estrada's part, but also a family vendetta against Pat Smith due to a past relationship. To further justify this statement, Willie Williams said in her testimony that during her time with Ms. Estrada, she seemed very anxious that I find something to indicate proof of crime. She spoke of how her father would not only be pleased, but actually proud if he heard that his daughter finally took Smith into federal custody. Estrada has always blamed Pat for the breakup and promised that Mr. Smith's family would pay for his heartbreak. This isn't just a matter of having a bad testimony on Estrada's part. This is a matter of personal animosity for wrongfully putting an innocent man in prison. That is a reason to doubt. According to what we've all heard today, Detective Estrada was actively, almost desperately, trying to find some way to blame Mr. Smith for the tragic death of Frank Howe. This is not right. The state has failed today. What this case is really about is a security officer trying to do his job to protect the public entering and leaving the grocery store, only to have his reputation unreasonably marred by a detective with a desire for Pat Smith's affliction. After presenting you with the evidence of all witnesses, the defendant has to be acquitted of any charges that have been brought against him today. Pat Smith deserves the return of his freedom. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. The defense has brought up several issues of this case as well as the prosecution. They have addressed the topic with Pat Smith on the provocation of this case. Frank Howe, as explained by Pat Smith, was reaching in his pocket, presumably to be a deadly weapon. But this is not true. The tragic death of Frank Howe could have been easily solved with a simple question on the part of Pat Smith to say, "May I please see your receipt, sir?" And the deceased of Frank Howe would have gladly offered the receipt from his pocket. Also, we would like, as the prosecution, to respond to the fact of the cause of death of Frank Howe. There is a huge time relationship with the cause of death. The cause of death, as testified by Dr. Williams, was caused due to the blow to the chest, which was used with the karate chop of the K5, and Pat Smith himself even impact of the K-5. Also, we as the prosecution would like to point out the bias of Dr. Shea because of the cross-examination questions that have been produced in this trial, that he has been paid for his opinion. Frank Howe wasn't dead, also going back to Dr. Williams, wasn't dead until the K-5 karate chop was administered to the chest of Frank Howe. And this is by his own admission of Pat Smith. Also, his own admission is that Pat Smith also has a hearing issue due to a karate chop of the K-5 that he even received from a student earlier in January. And this is why we as the prosecution believe that Pat Smith is guilty of Frank Howe's murder. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this concludes the presentation of evidence and arguments by counsel. It's my opportunity at this point to instruct you and then later to ask the bailiff to take you to a place for deliberation. You, the jury, have heard the evidence. From that evidence and the evidence alone is your duty to find the facts and determine whether those facts show that the defendant, Pat Smith, committed second-degree murder, manslaughter, or negligent homicide. If you find that the state has proven each of the offenses fall beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find the defendant guilty of that offense as false. If you cannot find every element of an offense, and that it has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must acquit the defendant, Pat Smith. The charges are second-degree murder. Pat Smith intentionally caused the death of Frank Howe. That Pat Smith knew that his conduct would cause the death or serious physical injury to Frank Howe. And 3, that manifesting extreme indifference to Frank Howe's life, Pat Smith recklessly engaged in action creating a grave risk of death to Frank Howe. Second, an alternative charge, manslaughter. Pat Smith recklessly caused the death of Frank Howe. Pat Smith committed a third alternative, negligent homicide. Failure to perceive an unjustified risk of death or serious injury from his conduct to Frank Howe. I further instruct you that the evidence of this case consists solely of the testimony of the witnesses and the exhibits admitted into evidence. I'm going to provide you with a copy of the charges that we have here. I'm going to provide you with the 3 exhibits that have been referenced in the trial today, and also would note that as far as the expert witnesses go, the qualifications for both witnesses as experts in pathology and qualified to speak in that specialty here today has been stipulated to by both parties. So let me get these exhibits for you. That concludes our case, and I want to